All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into a text that makes a pretty huge claim about the differences between men and women. It's definitely controversial, arguing that one sex is actually more evolutionarily advanced than the other. So yeah, let's get into it.
The source we're looking at today really doesn't pull any punches. It just comes right out and says it. Now look, our job here isn't to say if this is right or wrong. We're just here to break down the argument, to see how the author even gets to a conclusion like this. Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at that provocative claim itself. Then, we'll dive into the worlds of the brain, the neurology behind it. After that, we'll see how that supposedly plays out in our divergent daily lives. Then we'll look at the evolutionary angle with echoes of the past. And finally, we'll see where this all leads with a look to the future.
Okay, let's dive right into that central thesis. The argument here is that if you really want to understand the big claim, you can't just look at the surface stuff. You have to go deeper. And according to this source, it's not really about biology in the typical sense. It's all about the brain.
Right, so the core idea presented here is that the fundamental difference, it's neurological. It's not about physical strength or hormones, but literally about how men's and women's brains are wired to see and interact with the world.
Okay, how does the text actually explain this supposed neurological divide? Well, it all comes down to a theory about which parts of the brain are doing the heavy lifting. It basically paints a picture of two completely different operating systems. And you can see that contrast pretty clearly here. The argument goes that the male brain is dominated by the left hemisphere. The part that's all about logic, rationality, and goal-oriented thinking. It's focused on reality. But the female brain, according to this text, uses both the left and the right hemispheres. So it blends that logic with emotion, connection, and a bigger picture pursuit of the spiritual. Okay, so the text says these brain differences aren't just some abstract theory. No, it argues they have a huge impact on our actual day-to-day lives. We're talking about everything from how we communicate to how we approach relationships. And this slide is a perfect example of that. When it comes to communication, the source paints two very different pictures. For men, a conversation has a goal: solve a problem, make a point, get to a conclusion. It's logical, causal. For women, though, the goal is the conversation. It's about the process of sharing, about empathy and connection. It's associative, not always linear. You can see how, according to this logic, misunderstandings could happen, right? Now, let's talk about relationships. The text offers a, let's say, unique take on male promiscuity. It's not about a greater need for emotional connection or anything like that. Instead, it's defined as a result of having really simple, singular requirements. A man might be attracted to just one thing, say a specific personality trait. And if the bar is just that one thing, well, it's going to be a lot easier to trigger that attraction. On the flip side, the source describes the female approach to relationships as a straight line. It's a clear progression. Step 1, get acquainted. Step 2, fall in love. And step 3, get married. Each step has to happen in order, and marriage is presented as the ultimate form, the end goal of the whole process. But for men, the text argues it's completely different. These aren't steps in a sequence at all. They're just states. Being acquainted, being in love, being married. And the logic presented here is that these states can exist at the same time, in parallel, even with different people. It's a pretty wild contrast to the linear path we just saw. All right, now this is interesting. The text takes on a big stereotype head-on, the idea that women are more materialistic. And it says, nope, that's a prejudice, and it's actually got it all backwards. The reasoning comes down to a misunderstanding of historical social roles. So here's the argument. The text claims that a man's core duty, historically, has always been about ensuring survival. We're talking food, shelter, safety. And because of that, men are inherently forced to be the ones focused on the material world, on tangible benefits and power. It's not a preference. It's presented as a necessity of their role. So where did all these traits supposedly come from? Well, according to the source, we gotta go way back, like way back. The argument is that these modern differences are just echoes of the past, forged by the different survival jobs men and women had in ancient times. And this table lays it out pretty clearly. The ancient male role was hunting. To do that, you needed incredible spatial awareness to track prey and not get lost. The source says that skill evolved into what we see today. And fighting for survival? Well, that created an absolute inability to accept failure, because failure meant death.
Now, using that same evolutionary lens, the author then tries to explain that old stereotype about women and directions. The argument is that since women's ancient roles rarely involved, say, tracking a mammoth for 3 days, those spatial skills just weren't needed. And over thousands of years, the ability, well, it's as it degenerated.
And I want to circle back to this idea of failure for a second, because the text really hammers this point home. It says that for men, the fear of failure isn't just in their head, it's practically written into their DNA. It's an echo from a time when failure wasn't just embarrassing, it could literally get you and everyone you cared about killed.
All right, so we've looked at the brain, at daily life, at the evolutionary backstory. Now we get to the grand finale. This is where the source pulls all those threads together to make its final and most provocative point.
So the text lays out this big picture timeline of human history. It describes the ancient past as a matriarchy, stable but not developing very quickly. Then you have the present, the patriarchy, which is all about rapid development through competition and conflict, but it's also super destructive. And then there's the future, which it says has to be an evolution towards the spiritual world.
And this quote really is the linchpin of the whole argument. The idea is that the material world, all the stuff we've been focused on for millennia, is just the foundation. It's the launch pad. As humanity evolves, the real work, the future, is in the spiritual world.
And there it is. That's how we get back to that bombshell claim from the beginning. The logic is a simple if-then statement. If the future is spiritual, and if, as the text has been arguing, women are naturally more attuned to that spiritual world, then, the source concludes, they represent a more advanced stage of human evolution. It all clicks into place.
So what are we left with? The source lays out one possible path for civilization, and it's definitely a debatable one. But it does leave us with a pretty big question to chew on. Is the future of humanity really a spiritual one? Are we destined to move beyond the material world that got us here? It's definitely something to think about.